The history of the royal family of Hyrule is also the history of Calamity Ganon. This evil has been turned back time and time again by a warrior wielding the soul of a hero and a princess who carries the blood of the goddess. With the passage of time, each conflict with Ganon faded into legend. So listen closely as I tell you of this legend that occurred 10,000 years ago.
There have been many things that stayed consistent throughout the Zelda games. Demise's curse, the Triforce pieces that are given to Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, as well as the fabled Master Sword, having the power to repel evil. This sword is usually vital in the role of stopping the Demon King Ganon and goes by many names. The Blade of Evil's Bane, the Legendary Sword, the Master Sword of Resurrection, and finally the Sword that Seals the Darkness.
However, while the sword itself is within Breath of the Wild, the way to obtain it was completely changed in comparison to previous Zelda titles. Not only that, but many other things about the legendary blade seem to have been greatly altered as well. This leaves us with many questions. Is the Master Sword losing its power to repel evil? Is the curse from Demise finally lifting? Is it even possible for the sword to be weakened enough to lose its power?
Well, let me tell you that I did my research on this. I looked at every single appearance of the Master Sword in every game, as well as other iconic Zelda items and characters. But in order to get information as accurate as possible, I've asked Joseph and Conrad from Commonwealth Realm to help me with this. In this episode of the two-part special for Inside Breath of the Wild, we will look at the fabled Master Sword and its use in the most recent Zelda game.
Just to clarify, when we talk about whether the Master Sword is needed in the game, we are referring to not if it can damage Ganon, but whether or not it is needed for the finishing blow. No matter how much damage can be done to him, in the end, it is the Master Sword that appears to be the only weapon that can do this.
Let's first look at how it works in Breath of the Wild. To begin with, the player can beat the game without even having the blade. This is rather strange, since almost every single time the Master Sword is within a Zelda game, it is required to defeat Ganon with the finishing blow. And while one can argue that you can indeed deliver the final blow to Calamity Ganon and damage Dark Beast Ganon, the latter by using projectile shots from the sword, people seem to forget that there is actually another form of him. This is his spectral form.
There's only one person who can apparently affect him in this form, and that is the princess with the blood of the goddess, Zelda. The sword also, if used too much, can run out of energy and be rendered useless for a while until it regains its power. With that said, we can't ignore the fact that the sword itself seems to resonate a glow when in a dungeon or around guardians and malice. It still seems to have some sort of power within it.
The Master Sword's history stems way back to the very first game in the timeline, Skyward Sword. In order to defeat Demise, once he eventually returned to Hyrule, the goddess Hylia created a weapon known as the Goddess Sword. Later on, the blade was bathed in the 3 sacred flames, and once it received the blessing of Zelda, it finally transformed into the true Master Sword. Link would eventually be able to defeat Demise and later on, Ganondorf.
In games such as A Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds, it can destroy magical barriers in order to access certain locations. The blade can also break powerful dark curses, and in Skyward Sword, Skyward Strikes can be performed by channeling heavenly energy. Fi also makes a first appearance. In most Zelda games, if Link is at full health, he is able to shoot beam-like projectiles using the Master Sword.
Only those that are pure of heart and strong of body can wield this sacred sword. Those with tainted hearts cannot touch the blade, and if the wielder is too young, the sword will seal their soul and awaken them once they are at the right age. This means that the sword also gives the wielder the ability to travel back and forth in time. The sword also ends up being the key to enter the Temple of Light. In Twilight Princess, the sword can be infused with the power of souls, which allows it to cut through fog in the Twilight Realm.
In some games, the Master Sword can be upgraded through smithing or magic. And finally, in Breath of the Wild we see that if one who is too weak tries to draw the sword, then they will lose their life.
For the most part, the sword does seem to act in a similar way in Breath of the Wild. It glows when around guardians and malice. Fi is referenced to be residing within the sword and talks to Zelda, and projectiles can be fired when the player is at full health. However, the first DLC pack expanded on this, making the Master Sword act as a key to the trial and allowed it to be upgraded to the awakened state.
Even after upgrading the sword, it still appears to run out of energy like before. It's as if the sword itself is somehow weakened. While you can look at the Master Sword not being needed as a way to make the player feel like they have more control within the game, it still seems very weird that it wouldn't be required. Nintendo could have easily kept the feeling of freedom while still making the Master Sword be a must-have item in order to beat it. Just by creating a magical barrier around Hyrule Castle that couldn't be broken unless Link had the Master Sword, it would have made finding shrines a lot more valuable in the game.
To fully grasp how close the Master Sword has been tied to the Zelda franchise in general, we need to take a step back and look at its appearance in previous Zelda titles. We won't be looking at its appearance in Hyrule Warriors at all, since that is non-canon to the official Zelda timeline. However, all of the other games will be open up for discussion.
In the span of 19 games, the Master Sword makes an appearance in 9 of them, 8 if you count Oracle of Ages and Seasons as one game, since it is only obtained once you begin a linked game. Pun not intended, but definitely appreciated.
This means that there are 11 other games that don't have this iconic sword within them. Both the original Legend of Zelda and the Adventure of Link have a magical sword in them. You could argue that this was an early adaptation of the Master Sword. It even shot a sword beam when at full hearts, an ability that would eventually become a normal theme of the Master Sword. To get the magical sword in the first game, there was a 12 heart container requirement. This is the only other time where a certain amount of hearts were needed to wield the sword, so Breath of the Wild was most likely referencing the original game with its 13 heart requirement.
However, there was yet another sword introduced into the series that was given the power to repel evil. This was the Four Sword, originating in the Minish Cap, making an appearance in 3 other Zelda games, Four Swords Adventures, and the Game Boy port of A Link to the Past. In the first 2 games, it is required, defeating Vatai and then eventually Ganon. Because the Master Sword already exists in A Link to the Past, the sword was most likely just thrown in for some extra content in the Game Boy version.
The other games where the Master Sword doesn't make an appearance are Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and Triforce Heroes. All of these have valid reasons for the sword to not exist, however. Both Link's Awakening and Majora's Mask occur outside the Kingdom of Hyrule, one on an island, and the other in an entirely different world.
Since the Master Sword was washed away at the end of the Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks not having the Master Sword made sense. And Triforce Heroes, well, that is pretty self-explanatory.
What's important to note regarding the Master Sword's appearance is that the main villain Ganondorf appears in all these games, with the exception of Four Swords Adventures and a couple others. Every other game that he is in, the Master Sword ends up being the weapon that seals him away. Like how Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf are connected through Demise's curse, the Master Sword also appears to be linked in this endless cycle, as it is always the weapon that ends up defeating him. This would make sense, since Hylia specifically crafted this sword to seal the Demon King once he made a return to Hyrule.
There are some games, however, in which Ganon isn't defeated with the sword. Link's Awakening, the Oracle games, as well as Four Sword Adventures. All of these can be explained by looking closer at the games in question. In Link's Awakening, you fight the nightmare that takes form of Ganon and other enemies from his past. This isn't actually Ganon, and therefore it has nothing to do with Demise's curse.
The Oracle games play out a bit differently, since they have 2 different stories. When only playing one game, it is possible to achieve the Master Sword. However, the real ending can be seen once you play a linked version of the game. By doing this, the Master Sword becomes available and you fight the real final boss, Ganon. Since both of the Master Sword and Ganon only make an appearance in the linked version of the game implies that they are both connected. The sword isn't needed to defeat Ganon. However, the ritual to revive him was incomplete. This means that it makes sense for the Master Sword to not be required, as you are fighting a mindless beast.
Four Swords Adventures is a bit tricky. The Four Swords had a sealing power similar to the Master Sword, so it makes sense that Ganon had to be defeated using it. But this sword was also required to defeat Vati, so it raises a question of whether he's a part of Demise's curse. We do know that in the final game he appears and that he was trying to resurrect the Demon King, so perhaps he's somehow linked to all of this.
Narrowing down the Zelda games to what we have left, you can see that each time Ganon was defeated, the Master Sword was vital. First defeating Demise, then the evil King Ganondorf, whether that be as Gerudo or Beast form. Yet, what about Breath of the Wild? I've talked about in a previous video how I don't think Calamity Ganon is actually Ganon. That could explain why it isn't needed to defeat him. Or going back to the Oracle games, Calamity Ganon's reincarnation was supposedly incomplete, so that could explain why the blade is useless. But then there is Dark Beast Ganon in his spectral form.
You could say that the Master Sword is indeed vital to take down Dark Beast Ganon as well as the Bow of Light. The Master Sword can shoot projectile beams to weaken Ganon's vulnerable spots, and the Light Bow is given to you by Zelda for the sole purpose of fighting him. But there is a third option. If you use any type of bow with ancient arrows, that also will damage him. Yes, you could argue that the player would need the light bow in case they don't have any ancient arrows, but why make the ancient arrows an option to begin with? A game where neither the Master Sword or light bow are needed to defeat Ganon changes the formula of Zelda games drastically.
So what happened? Since this game greatly changed the Zelda formula, there is a possibility that Demise's curse may be lifted. In the game, Ganon transforms into a beast that we have never seen before, giving up on reincarnation and assuming his pure enraged form. The curse set on the hero back in Skyward Sword was a continued rebirth of the ancient evil. So if Ganondorf gives up on reincarnation in Breath of the Wild, could the curse finally be broken?
Another possibility is that the Master Sword itself has weakened and lost its power to repel evil. We know from previous memories unlocked in the game that it looks damaged. But did it actually lose its power? Besides the fact that it runs out of energy even after upgrading it to its awakened state, can something like this actually happen?
We learn in the Wind Waker that in order to keep the Master Sword's power to repel evil, a Sage of Wind and Earth are needed to keep the sword in its powerful state. Because Ganondorf killed the two sages when Link first confronts him, he's unable to harm the evil king.
You cannot defeat me with a blade that does not sparkle with the power to repel evil. What you hold is useless.
Eventually, the hero is able to awaken two new sages and the power of the sword is returned. In the final battle against Ganondorf, he's finally defeated. This means that the sword can indeed be weakened if under the right circumstances.
However, by simply looking at the blade in Breath of the Wild, we know this wouldn't be a reason for it to lose its power. Before the sword becomes a true Master Sword in Wind Waker, it has an entirely different look. The blade also has the same incomplete form in Skyward Sword before it is blessed by Princess Zelda. If the sword really was weakened this way in the game, it would have a design similar to this.
One final theory is that the Master Sword has never weakened and still has the power to repel evil. According to legend, the Sheikah were an advanced civilization. Could they have somehow harnessed the same divine power found within the Master Sword to create the divine beasts and ancient weapons? The fact that ancient arrows specifically can damage Dark Beast Ganon would make it plausible. Do they have the same power as the Master Sword? Plus, the name Divine Beast. Could that be the exact same divine power that was given to the Master Sword by the goddess Hylia?
This still doesn't seem like enough though. Assuming that the Sheikah were able to harness the divine power within the Master Sword, it still must have been weakened somehow. It's not needed, yet there doesn't seem to be any evidence implying that it actually was. Perhaps we need to rethink this and go back to some cutscene footage.
To know Calamity Ganon's true form, one must know the story from an age-long past. The Demon King was born into this kingdom, but his transformation into balance created the horrors of the ceremonial
Not too bad, actually. You're fine, you're not. There's a
Why doesn't the Master Sword glow? It's established that when around Guardians and Malice, the blade will glow whether it is fully awakened or not. And Link is surrounded by Guardians before he falls in the second last memory. So why doesn't the sword glow? It's not like Nintendo would completely forget about this detail. This game has been worked on for years. Unless it not only was physically damaged, but actually lost its power to repel evil?
And in the memory Subdued ceremony, Zelda mentions that the sword is bound to the hero of Hyrule and always aided him, whether skyward bound, adrift in time, or steeped in the glowing embers of twilight. The Master Sword is hinted at being directly linked to the hero. So did the sword lose its power and weaken because Link was on the verge of death? Did the sword heal over 100 years specifically because Link was recovering in the Shrine of Resurrection?
In another memory, Zelda asks Link if he can hear the Master Sword speaking to him. Since Link doesn't talk, we get no response. But could the Master Sword have not spoken to him since its power was weakening? We do know that the sword must have regained at least some of its power since it glows when around Guardians and Malice. But he might have not fully recovered. While Link's injuries are healed when he wakes up, he does lose his memory, and it's not hard to believe that he would still be weak. Since the hero and the sword are linked, this could theoretically mean that the Master Sword is still not fully recovered by the end of the game.
And with that, this video has come to an end. The Master Sword has been in a lot of different Zelda games, and Breath of the Wild is no exception. But the way it's portrayed in the game opens up the door to many new possibilities for Zelda games. And perhaps this is a sign of an entirely new line of Zelda games. Whether the sword continues to play a vital role in the games or not, it will be very interesting to see what Nintendo has up their sleeves in the near future. However, there is one final question that needs to be answered. If the Master Sword wasn't the thing that defeated Calamity Ganon, then what did? Well, obviously it had something to do with Zelda and the Triforce. But as for now, my role is finished.
If you want to see the conclusion to this short series, the second part will be over at our channel. We'll be discussing the Triforce and its important role to the game's story. Our channel and video will be linked in the description as well as the end of this video.
And that's it for us. Thank you so much for your continued support of the channel. We've come a long way recently, and have hit the big milestone of 25,000 subscribers, and we're just getting started. Next stop, 50k. If you love the video and want to see more, then make sure to subscribe. Share this video with your friends, and if you haven't already, make sure to check out Commonwealth Realm's video on how the Triforce changed in Breath of the Wild. I've been Nintendo Crisis, and I will see you guys later.